What is this movie?
Dying's for fools. I am on a drug. It's called Charlie Sheen.
Oh, no. No, I know what this is. I thought they canned this thing over a decade ago. Well, sit
What's
tight,
up,
ladies and
everybody?
gentlemen,
It's Critical.
because we're about to have
a week or two ago,
ourselves
I
what
found
the hell
a
is food fight?
Hi, welcome to Threshold Animation Studios, home of Foodfight.
In 1993, Lawrence Kasanoff, a producer in Hollywood with a gnome named Norm, Bud the Chud, and Ghoulies Go to College under his belt, decided to found a new company, Threshold Entertainment, with his buddy Joshua Wexler and Allison Savage. With Threshold, Kasanoff would produce and direct Mortal Kombat as well as Mortal Kombat Annihilation. With the exclusive screen rights for the Mortal Kombat property and its immediate mass success, Threshold had kicked off with a bang. With that money, Threshold created The Threshold in 1999, a men's entertainment website with an assortment of content such as flash games where you shoot Pokemon, a web series where classic cartoon characters let themselves go, named Where Are the Tunes Now, another starring Jerry Springer called The Producer, and an entire section titled Threshold Babes, which is fairly self-explanatory. This included webisodes for a series called Bikini Masterpiece Theater, where women would read Shakespeare in a bikini, and Slumber Party Secrets, a place for girls as young as 13 to share their secrets complete with photos to the public.
The web days were funny because they would bring in talent for all the website stuff, and it would be like bikini Shakespeare quote of the day and bikini joke of the day, and they had a green screen in the back. So at any time you'd walk through the front of the office and there'd be like 30 or 40 girls, and they're all just being for these web series where they'd go and tell a joke in a bikini, and Larry be schmoozing them up, and it was hilarious.
I mean, we would have routine casting sessions where he was really just looking for girlfriends. These gorgeous women would walk through the office in lingerie or a swimsuit because that was part of his brief. Frankly, it was incredibly disgusting. You felt dirty on casting days because you knew nothing was being cast. It was just Larry looking for a girlfriend.
He would take these women to the roof and photograph them naked. He even tried making a softcore porn site while making the movie.
With the success of their web series, it was steadily becoming clear that maybe Threshold should lean further into it. In 1997, a 22-page treatment was written for a movie featuring famous food mascots, which would remain a treatment for the next few years. In 2000, Threshold's subsidiary Threshold Digital Research Labs would release their first real attempt at 3D animation, Edward Fuddrucker Fibbed Big, based off the children's book of the same name and shown before select screenings of Rugrats in Paris to a fair amount of critical acclaim. That same year, Threshold would make their big announcement, their first digitally animated feature film, Foodfight, based on that same treatment from 3 years prior. With a $25 million investment from Korean company Natural Image, Foodfight had gotten permission to use many recognizable mascots such as Mr. Clean, Twinkie the Kid, Chester Cheetah, the Keebler Elves, Mrs. Buttersworth, and many more. Threshold didn't pay a fee and wasn't being paid for product placement. The story's origins are unclear. While the official story is Wexler and Kasanoff came up with it together while taking a car ride to Malibu, there seems to be some disagreement.
Nobody really knows. Josh claims it, Larry claims it, and I know I certainly don't. One of the original writers claimed a little bit of it. It was an idea that socially developed around the management at Threshold at the time.
In the story, the mascots of America's beloved food come to life. The aisles become cities, and the mascots, nicknamed Ikes, are living beings. Our main character, Dex Detective, a stereotypical noir kind of detective and a mascot for the serial Cinnamon Sleuth, is a protector of these Ikes. After his girlfriend, Sunshine Goodness, goes missing, he loses motivation to continue. Meanwhile, Brand X, a very fascist-looking generic brand led by Prune mascot Professor Plotnik as well as Lady X and other X troops, attacks Marketropolis with monstrous prunes attempting to discontinue and replace every Ike. Plotnik wasn't around for very long, however. Besides one mention of him in a press release from 2001, Lady X, a very sexually charged character, seemed to have taken his place as the main villain that same year.
I was told they were going for gross and funny. Foodfight started off as a movie for the PG-13 crowd. Think Mad Magazine, Mikey packages, just gross and funny adult with subtle humor.
My perspective on animation is there's no such thing as a kids or adults movie unless it's really badly done. Jokes can be included in a film that go over the kid's head, but the adults can enjoy it. I mean, if you look at classic animation, it's not just for kids. Most of it was for adults, but you could always bring your kids to it. It was a kid-friendly because it was colorful and funny, but there was always a subtext. So this was the same.
Immediately, there were huge plans for an entire Foodfight franchise. There would be a 3D animated prequel web series, real food products using the characters, a live performance titled Foodfight on Ice, action figures, collectible toys, a video game being developed by Midway Games, and even a charity titled the Foodfight Foundation, which Larry actually founded. At the same time, almost like Foodfight's brother, Threshold would work on Hershey's really big 3D show, a 10-minute film that could be seen at Hershey's Chocolate World. This actually would be delivered on time and serve as an attraction at Chocolate World for over a decade. Foodfight's concept had inspired a few other ideas at Threshold as well.
Now, I had heard about Foodfight before when I was interning. I had heard that they had done like a small amount of work on it. I had heard that it was in development. I knew that there was going to be, I think, 3 or 4 other movies. There was going to be Foodfight, there's going to be Arcade, where, you know, at night the video game characters in the arcade come to life. And then there was also Mascot, you know, at night the football mascots come alive. You can see a trend. I want to say there was another one, but it may have just been that 3.
There was a 4th one titled Sunday Comics Caper, the same concept but with comic strip characters.
That was the plan. They were going to do a whole series of movies based on other people's IP. Arcade was written by the same guy that wrote Foodfight. It didn't go anywhere because Foodfight didn't go anywhere. They couldn't even get any of the IPs they wanted for Sunday Comic Capers. We did a short with Berkeley Breathitt's Edward Fuddwupper, and Larry kept trying to tell Berkeley to sign off on licensing Bloom County until Berkeley finally told him, "Shut the fuck up. I'm not going to give you my stuff." He blew up in the middle of the studio because Larry kept trying to get Bloom County stuff to be in his comic movie.
Scheduled to be released in 2002, Foodfight began production with Larry Kasanoff being its director, co-writer, producer, and even voice actor. Joshua Wexler, George Johnson, and Allison Savage would produce the film alongside him. Jim George, director of Rover Dangerfield and Disney veteran, who had previously designed characters for Threshold's The Producer as well as their pilot The Afterlife, would also be designing the characters for Foodfight as well as being the animation consultant. Other artists such as R.C. Montesquieu and Gary Clare would be designing the extra background characters like Lucy Goosey, Egubus, Plum Dum, and Space Cadet Bob. Environments would be illustrated by Mark Nunenmacher, Grigor Boyad, and Star Wars storyboard artist Alex Tavolaris.
They showed us the pitch for Foodfight that they were early on. They were working on Edward Fuddwupper fit big, so that was kind of exciting. Berkeley Breathitt, and then this talk of, you know, this Foodfight had so much potential with companies putting their product in the film and celebrities, you know, voicing the name and that kind of stuff, and they had a pretty good pitch for it at the time.
Animation began that same year, created an off-the-shelf software called Lightwave, running on Windows 2000.
When I first started working here, we couldn't even fit in the studio. We worked from home, and we would come in a couple times a week and kind of showcase our work and give updates. And then after a while, they got more space, and then we moved into the studio. And it was just kind of crummy and dusty and dirty back there, but they had a bunch of us at folding tables, and we were crammed in there. It was fun. It was a fun environment, and it was fast-paced, and it was always some kind of project or something high-end coming through.
Like, the interior of the space was really cool. There were, I don't know if anyone else has described this for you yet, all the stuff from Mortal Kombat was everywhere. So, like, the severed head of King Goro's, like, on the coffee table when you walk in. And when you go back into the room where all the animators and editors were, like, there was just, like, mummies and all kinds of cool stuff everywhere. And it was very, very dark, almost pitch black at some times. It was freezing in there. I don't know if other people have mentioned how cold it was in the animation dungeon. But it was very cold. So this is in California, so I was very bundled up. I tried to get like a nice like North Face jacket to wear while I was in the building, but I did get told a couple of times that I was not dressing appropriately for work. And, I think that I took it as the implication is they wanted me to dress a lot more feminine, which I would tell them, hey, I'm freezing in there. I'm not going to be wearing a skirt and a blouse because it's way too cold. And, I did get spoken with a couple of times about that.
Around 2001, Dex was changed from a human being to a dog. Instead of Dex Detective, he was Dex Dog Detective.
After the initial release date was off the table, Larry had to resell it to the investors. Human Dex wasn't tracking very well and was boring compared to the other characters. I had suggested that animal characters were more appealing, but of course that was ignored for the first few years.
Dex's new form wasn't really made public until around 2004. Along with that, they changed Sunshine into a cat girl of sorts. There was steady headway being made in Foodfight's production. Animators like Jeremy Yates and modelers like Neil Fordyce and Lee Carlton would be creating much of what investors would see in a 7-minute sizzle reel of completely finished, squashed and stretched lightwave goodness. Pencil tests by Jem George were even done in order to determine how certain characters would move.
That reel was directed by Jim George and George Johnson following Ursley's really big 3D show. It was a classic animation piece. The reel was done in the style of that particular show, very classic animation style. Perfect squash and stretch stuff that could have been animated on paper or in the computer.
They did have that, yeah. That was like the hero scenes. Like basically what he did was he just basically went and did those scenes, went all the way through production with whatever animation company he had made a deal with. They do that for like a show reel, right? He needed to have something to show investors that this was going to be a real movie. So instead of like waiting to show them parts of the real movie, he would, and this has been done before. Like the studios, they do sizzle reels where they pick like the 10 beautiful shots that they want to take all the way through render to animation, lighting, and everything. And that's what they'll show like their partners, like, hey, look, this is what our movie's gonna look like. So that's what that was. It was like a show reel. I think they ended up probably replacing all those shots because they wouldn't have matched. And I'm sure he didn't even think about that when he did it. But he basically just used that to get people to invest, I think, at that point.
There wasn't a cast yet, so in this reel, the characters were voiced by the producers themselves.
Check this out, you drive me loopy, baby. If perhaps you desire a companion for those lonely bachelor nights.
In terms of a real cast, they were still trying to figure that part out.
Oh man, there was a lot going on then. For Daredevil Dan, they had done a test with Chris Tucker. They had done, I think, Chris Rock as well. And there was so many people, I can't even think of who they all were at the time.
Larry told Animation Magazine in 2002 that, "We're betting a ton that it's going to be a great movie. We're risking more on this movie than any other venture I've ever been involved with in my life."
They took a meeting with Fox, with Sony, with Warner Brothers, with MGM. Everybody was interested if it was going to come to them as a fully finished product. But nobody wanted to put any money into it. Larry wanted to maintain control, and studios don't do that with first-time animation directors.
In 2003, Threshold would sign a new 4-year, multi-million-dollar deal with IBM to use industrial servers and processors for their studio remotely accessed from IBM's facilities using their new on-demand system. Threshold wanted to create a digital backlot, a library of characters and environment assets to be used at any time in various animated productions. Using this system, it was projected that an animated feature would only take 18 months to complete, and Foodfight would use up to 6,000 extras in one scene. There were even plans to build a new animation facility, lease it out to firms that wanted access to high-end equipment with an IBM connection, a service that was going to be called Animation on Demand.
This is CNN.
Now an up-and-coming Hollywood studio is partnering with IBM to give animated movies a makeover.
We're huge fans of Pixar. I think they do an amazing job, but we have to think to ourselves, well, how can we go out and try and do something different?
Threshold's answer? Do it with the backing of an unlikely Hollywood partner, IBM. The deal uses IBM technology to help speed up the animation process and make it more real-time. It's allowed the company to create a complex digital world with over 100 characters, nearly 200 sets, and tens of thousands of extras.
IGN reported that an executive told them that the film was 60% complete by this time and was scheduled to be released in 2004, something that definitely cannot be explained or backed up anywhere else. In 2004, Larry told the New York Times that the film's assets had been stolen during the Christmas of 2002, saying that even the Secret Service was involved in the investigation, but the case went cold almost immediately. However, no mention of this was ever made beforehand. Threshold was still showing the same old reel in 2003, and even crew members don't have any memory of this happening back then.
We we were hot and heavy on Foodfight for a long time, and then it slowed down, and it just wasn't as much stuff. But we kind of shifted to other projects like Hercules and Mission Space for Disney. But that's when I left. They were still working on Foodfight, but it was nowhere near as hot and heavy as it was. No, I don't remember anything of a theft while we were there. No.
Was there a theft? I mean, do you really think there would only be one copy of the material, and do you really think it would only be on LPO tape? And do you think that none of the material would actually be in the server that was in another building? I mean, the person that was pressed on the theft was an ex-employee who didn't really like the way he had been treated. So that could be a reason. Maybe. I mean, a theft was convenient because the movie was 6 months late considering financial milestones that the investors were looking for. This was a pretty good excuse not to have it. It kind of destroyed the milestone calendar. I mean, if you have 2 different format copies in one location, a second copy in another location, and a 4th copy sitting in a vault in a bank. So, was there a theft that actually killed the whole thing? You decide.
Later that year, Threshold showed Lionsgate executives that same reel of animation from the film. The next year, they made a deal. In 2005, Lionsgate agreed to distribute the film as well as co-finance it along with the story art company, representing $20 million worth of investors. Lionsgate executive Tom Ortenberg stated,
"We're thrilled with the way that this project is evolving. It's shaping up to be a truly top-notch family picture. Everything about Foodfight, from the groundbreaking animation technologies being employed, to the master storyteller we have in director Larry Kasanoff, to the all-star cast that the project has attracted, perfectly reflects the nascent Lionsgate Family Entertainment Division's mandate to produce large-scale, high-quality family entertainment."
Ortenberg wasn't wrong. At the time, Foodfight looked fairly promising. Thousands of characters could be displayed in one scene at once, extremely detailed sets were modeled, it had access to a wealth of well-known American symbols, there was potential. The cast had been announced that same year with Charlie Sheen, Wayne Brady, Hilary Duff, Christopher Lloyd. It was solid.
Lady X was always supposed to be Eva. She did a pretty good job in the voiceover department. I felt so bad for Wayne Brady, though. We set him up in Buzzy's recording studio downtown, a great voiceover studio. Larry kept trying to tell him to do all this steppin', fetchin' stuff, and you could tell the guy was really uncomfortable with the whole Daredevil Dan thing. But he really needed the money, so he did the part. There were hours and hours of dialogue that were thrown away. It wasn't really characteristic. It was just racist.
Let me show you how it's done. Every individual building has been built in 3D to exacting details, right down to the marquee on Raisin City Music Hall or the giant Chinese dragons on Fu Manchu's pagoda. What's more important to note, however, is that we did a tremendous amount of research and development with IBM so we could actually build the entire city in 3D. We didn't just build the flats or the facade of the actual building, we built the city. This way, we can move the camera or characters anywhere we want. We can fly over rooftops, down streets, and around corners, all because we have taken the extra time to build the Marketropolis in complete 3D. In addition to the exteriors, we also built all of our interiors completely in 3D. For example, we didn't just build the Copa Banana stage, we built the entire nightclub. We didn't just build Lady X's War Room platform, we built the whole factory, and the same is true for Dr. Cy Neustrich's lab and all of the other. The reason is simple: more creative freedom and flexibility.
From there, a new angle had been proposed on how to make the movie. A new wave was brought upon the production entirely. Working with their new IBM system and the House of Moves mocap studio, Larry had begun a new chapter in Foodfight's story. Why animate when there's motion capture?
Larry didn't understand animation. When Larry took over to direct Foodfight, he didn't want to do it that way, especially when he found he could do motion capture instead. It meant he could direct performers instead of manage animation. I came in at the point when he was firing everyone who worked on the old way of doing it. They were moving out while we moved in.
Larry couldn't stand being committed to anything before he touched it. Animation is a storyboard-based medium. Once you do the boards, you're done. People are going to draw that, and it's going to get very expensive if you want to go back and touch things up. Larry wanted to direct it like a live-action movie, which is insane. We did a whole version of the movie with a live-action cast, and we did the entire movie that way. We went back and did motion capture based on that. Larry was able to direct it as if he were a director on a live-action film when it was an animated movie. It just didn't work. Jim, our animation guru, would try and educate Larry on how animation was done in meetings. He would just ignore everything. We just did everything we could to make it work.
Let me be really clear about this because it's very, very, very unusual. Most animated movies, historically, whether done on a computer or done in pencil,
lay out one angle and one shot. You draw the angle, you draw the shot, you only build the background for the angle, you only build the character to that shot, that's what you do. You work on it for 3-4 years. If you want to change that shot one day, you're out of luck. That's not what we do.
To bring our stars to life, we use a technology called motion capture. Again, with the help of our friends at IBM, we have spent a tremendous amount of time pioneering a groundbreaking new motion capture process that allows me, the film's director, to be able to work with our characters and the animation as if I were in a live-action movie. This has never been done before. And like a live-action movie, the first thing we do is rehearse with the actors to work on blocking, timing, and giving the actors an understanding of where things are supposed to be in the set around them. Traditionally, secondary animation has been keyframed animated. An artist, using a computer, would pose the individual or key frames of the character's movement by hand, trying to mimic the movements of a cartoony penguin or a dancing elephant. This has always been a very time-consuming, tedious, and sometimes trial-by-error task. Well, no more. Threshold Animation, along with IBM and others, has successfully developed a revolutionary motion capture technique to create this kind of animation. We were able to create a specially rigged computer model that would move the way we want an animated penguin to move, all based on motions coming from a human being. Previously, these kind of shots would take up to 6 months each, with animators laboriously trying to mimic a tap-dancing penguin, for example. Now, I can shoot this shot with precise control in about 15 minutes, and the great news, it's better.
Maya was in and Lightwave was out, along with the majority of the old animation crew. They definitely weren't going to make a 2006 release date. Because of this, investors made an agreement with Threshold, a promissory note stating that if the film was not completed by early 2008, that the Fireman's Fund insurance company would acquire the film and complete it as soon as possible with additional crew. Foodfight now had a definite deadline. The characters were being entirely remodeled, re-rigged, and retextured.
They put me on Lady X, like, right away. And the comment that was made to me was not good, which was, oh, well, you're a girl, so you know about makeup, so we'd like you to work on Lady X. Okay, well, now I'm learning makeup. I'm literally looking up makeup on the internet to try to figure out what to do. Because I was not a makeup girly. But I was trying to give her some, like, sparkle eyeshadow and, like, really work on the textures because I was into it. And then, meanwhile, while I was there, I want to say within the first week of my being hired. So they didn't see any of my finished work yet. But they had hired a second texture artist. And at one point, somebody said to me, I want to say it was my manager, but I don't remember. I was basically told Larry really likes this other guy and he wants him to do the whole movie. And I was like, I don't, like, that's a lot. Like, that's a lot of work. You know, maybe I can work on something. Like, you haven't even seen my work yet. And I'm working on Lady X. I'm doing really nice makeup. And then I was told that Lady X was getting a redesign and she got taken away from me. And that was the beginning of the of the cycle that I saw, which was Larry wants to redesign this character where we had already gotten to the texturing stage. So, you know the phases of it. So we have the concept art, and then someone models it, and then someone rigs it, and then it goes to texture art. And continually we would have characters make it down the line, and then everything has to get redone all over again. And it just kept happening. And you know, then I started getting given other things to work on because there was nothing for me to texture. And now it's, you know, my second week there. It was explained to me that the whole movie was done and now we have to redo scenes, and I would be given scenes to, like, make up the background, or, you know, like I'd be given a screenshot and they'd say, hey, can you try to recreate this? And I'd do the best that I could, because I'd be like, oh, we just don't have it anymore. And so I worked on that for a little bit, and then I would get told, oh, this scene isn't going to be in the movie anymore, so you can stop working on it, and we're going to give you something else.
For nearly the first 5 years, we didn't have any storyboards for the movie itself. When Larry finally realized we needed storyboards, he was angry because he didn't really understand the process. He couldn't understand why everyone looked like stick figures and that none of the investors would understand them. He had me do detailed drawings as quickly as possible. I couldn't keep up with the demands when we got to the point where we started photoshopping turnarounds of photos. It was useless to anyone else, but he was satisfied. The animatic is what was sent to the investors.
Larissa Clispy, originally hired for animation cleanup and as a script supervisor, was also tasked with cleaning up and organizing the remaining drives. A few dead rats, dusty scripts, and a paint job later, the Brighton studio was ready to go.
He was obsessed with the color blue. Not just any blue, but chroma key blue. He wore it nearly every day, and that couch was the exact same color. One day he said he wanted to repaint the entire building. He had me render up a virtual image of the building in chroma key blue, of course.
That same year, she discovered the assets to the early versions still located on the servers.
I found plenty of footage of the old style of animation for the film and the complete mess of drives they had there. It seemed to me that everything was still there and backed up several times.
We tried to salvage it because we were wanting to protect the crew. I really liked our crew. They were working under horrible conditions, and Larry would do a drive-by every morning at their computers and change things in the middle of that. Layout would already be done, and he would say things like, make it 10% funnier. What the hell does that mean? The troops were demoralized, and I tried my best to protect them.
An assortment of motion capture actors were hired, including professional dancer Holly Cruikshank and contortionist Daniel Browning-Smith, aka the Rubber Boy.
We use a high-definition camera to record our actors' performances, like Eva Longoria or Wayne Brady. This unique process requires no markers and no performance limitations for the talent. The video is then fed into a software program that actually tracks the movements of the face of our actors. When an eye moves on the actor, the eye moves in the 3D model of our animated character, to whatever degree we want. So if it should be more cartoony, the eye opens bigger. If we want it more subtle, the eye opens less. This allows for rapid and efficient application of facial animation to characters in every scene. More importantly, it allows us to translate the talents of our actors directly onto our animated characters. We are currently in production on our facial animation.
Yet the motion capture itself seemed to introduce some fairly memorable performances on their own.
Randomly, my commercial agent was like, oh, well, you mentioned motion capture. There's an audition for a motion capture job for some animated film. And I was like, okay. And I went in there. So it was like you go into this like building, there's people waiting in the lobby. And then they brought me in and it was like the director himself, which is pretty rare because I guess it was like his studio and he was running the auditions, which is not very common for like a regular thing. And I did this crazy, I busted out like all of my craziest moves and was doing this whole thing with my legs and my body. And it was the first and only time it's ever happened to me where he literally said, you've got the part, and then went outside and sent everyone home. And then ironically, he brought me in for another role, which was like Mr. X or something. And conversely, as compared to the previous audition, for some reason, no matter what I did, he hated it. So I thought for a minute I was going to play two roles, but somehow whatever I was doing for Mr. Clipboard didn't work for Mr. X or something. So he put me in like this spandex with the little balls and on the stage. And I had like the lines they had sent to me basically ahead of time. So I'd been practicing for a while, like trying to match my movements to the Christopher Lloyd audio clips.
Survival of the fittest.
Never opened, never enjoyed.
Broadway star Holly Cruikshank, who plays Lady X, can simply move in a more seductive way and dance far better than I could ever hope to animate by hand. In motion capture, I get the exact animation I want, better than I could ever do it any other way. I'm now going to take you through how a scene comes together. The scene we're working on is Dex and Lady X's tango scene in her apartment. As I mentioned, the first thing we do is rehearse with the actors until we get the exact timing of the scene right. With the dance sequence, it is important to make sure that the actors are hitting their marks, and therefore the timing of their motion is critical. Our actors put on their motion capture suits, and we move on to the stage where we record their actual performance.
Well, it was exciting because motion capture, you didn't even know about it back then. It was kind of a new thing. And so it was just a really fun experiment to try to do. So you put on the bodysuit with all the little dots all over you and do all the movement. And it seemed really fun and cool at the time. I can't remember the exact year, but I started the filming, I want to say 2006 or 2007. And then I came back in maybe a year or two after, do a couple more scenes. but I was just found out I was pregnant, so I wasn't even like showing or anything. So I was thinking like, okay, nobody's gonna notice, and they didn't even know that I was pregnant because it was like just pregnancy, like just happened. But now my daughter that I was pregnant with is like 15 and a half. So it's so funny. But I was thinking, like, when we were filming, I was like, oh, they'll be able to see this when they're like little toddlers. How exciting! And then I never heard when it came out. I don't think it even came out until they were like 11 or 12. So funny.
Finally, in 2007, they were recording voice lines. While mocap actors were acting and the animators were animating, Larry was supervising, and by his side were his two dogs, Kylie, a polite dog who would watch the dailies with her owner, and Monkey Del Monte, the exact opposite.
Larry had an old black dog he had had for a long time. You could see he loved her very much, and she was with him all day in his office. She was quiet and obedient. He then bought another very large brown dog during production called Monkey Del Monte. He did not like Monkey nearly as much and didn't seem to have any ability to trade him. When Monkey burned out from Larry's office, he would immediately go looking for food, and if you had your lunch somewhere, reachable, or any scrap of food on your desk, it was gobbled up immediately when Monkey was around.
Oh, yeah. His dog hated the song Happy Birthday. Anytime there was someone's birthday, they'd bring some cake in or something, and the dog absolutely hated the song Happy Birthday. It would just go nuts.
Here were amazing, talented artists working on graphics and animation in there, and everything that looked decent and true to the brand characters, he would change until it was beyond recognition from where it started in the worst way possible. I could go on and on all day. Every day was a new disaster brought on by incompetence on the part of the director. Meetings were a disaster and directed by the musings of a madman who also made me clean up his dog's diarrhea. I was hired to do one thing that I did very well, and after some time I was switched at his direction out of the blue for no reason other than pure whimsy, to do something completely different that I had no knowledge of how to do, and I was given no training and had to figure it out myself. Then he came 2 weeks later and asked me why I was doing such a crappy job compared to the specialists who had been doing it for years as their career. When I explained to him this wasn't what I was hired to do and I had to learn from scratch with no help, he asked me what the difference was.
One day he brings the dog in, he has the shock collar on the dog, and you just hear all day, like, monkey, no! And then you'd hear the, like, from him shocking the dog. I felt so bad for that poor dog, but also being one of the new people that wasn't treated very well there, and eager to please, there was one day when someone came up to me and said, hey, do you mind taking Larry's dog for a walk? I'm really busy and I can't. And I was like, sure. And I was thinking, all right, I'll just like take a quick walk or whatever. I never owned a dog before, so I didn't realize that this means that you have to pick up after the dog. And all of a sudden they're handing me all of these like trash bags and stuff. And they're like, by the way, his dog has diarrhea. Thanks, bye. And they basically shoved me out the door with this dog. And I could hear everyone laughing behind me as I go outside. So I think that like they had decided to put me up to this. And that wasn't cool. But yeah, I was picking up his dog's diarrhea outside and it was bad. So I had to go find like a piece of cardboard that was lying on the ground and like scrape it on there and get it into this bag. And you know, I came back inside and they were still laughing at me when I came back inside. I was a little humiliated, but I felt like, you know what? I'm better than you guys because I actually did it and you guys didn't.
Larry seemed to be obsessed with Lady X, the antagonist character in the movie. He was very focused on what she had to wear and how she moved. She was always kicking her legs up, and you could almost see up her dress in many shots. Then one day, I spotted him looking at a rendered shot of her. It was like he was actually attracted to her. As I watched, I heard him utter softly to himself, Lady X, Lady X. He was in love with her. I then found another rendered image which was not meant to go into the film. It was clearly rendered for him.
Larry's proclivities were pretty gross. That picture wasn't something an animation director decided to do for fun.
I remember once we sent a rendering, there was somebody editing like a completely rendered pass, and Larry was like, great, can you show it to me from the other side? And the guy was like, this is rendered. I can't. and back then it would take like, a couple days to render something. So, I mean, I think we used a render farm at some point, but not all the time. So the guy who was editing was like, I can't do it. And Larry was like, well, why not? I see them turn it around all the time in the other room. And it's like, yeah, it doesn't work that way. And then there was a time when I got put on animation. So I was not the best animator, but that's why I wanted to go into texture art, because I loved the texture art and I felt I was really good at that. But then Larry just like, one day he just walks in, comes up to me and he's like, hey, I want you to animate this scene where, oh shoot, what's the squirrel's name?
I'm your best friend, Daredevil Dan.
Yes, Daredevil Dan. Okay, he's like, so Larry walks in one day, comes right up to my computer, and he's like, there's a scene where Daredevil Dan takes off in his airplane, and I want the airplane to do this, and then do this, and then do a loop-de-loop. Can you do that? And I was just like, okay. So then I start animating it, but like that was all I had. I had nothing else to go on. So I did the best that I could with the instructions of doing this. And then he would come in like a few days later and be like, see your work on that Daredevil Dan scene. And I'd show it to him and he's like, no, not like that. It has to go like this, and then like this, and then like a loop-de-loop. And I'm thinking like, that's what I did. What don't you like about it? Like I need better feedback. And he's like, figure it out. I'll be back later. So I just did it differently the next time. And this kept happening also, where I had to keep reanimating this scene and I didn't know what I was doing. And after a while, I was put on something else. Larry at one point said to me, like, hey, I forget exactly how he said it, but he basically said that I wasn't doing a very good job as an animator. And I said to him, well, you hired me to be a texture artist, and I haven't been able to be a texture artist. I haven't textured anything. I've been put on all of these things that I haven't really, trained in doing. And he just looked at me and left. After that, I got laid off.
By this point, there had been extensive news coverage about the film over the past 5 or so years. At E3 2006, a demo of a 3D platformer Foodfight video game was put on display by 2K Games. It's unknown who developed it or how far it even got, but the game never saw the light of day.
We have some of the best marketing partners in the world in Procter & Gamble, Hormel, Cadbury Schweppes, Energizer, and more. Lionsgate, our domestic studio, releases the movie with over $100 million in marketing in April of 2007.
2007 rolled by, and still, no Foodfight.
But I was in charge of going through the files, and I remember looking at the M&Ms. And the green M&M looked like the red M&M. It was like a boy M&M. So I notified someone because I knew that the M&M meeting was coming up. And I was like, hey, I just noticed that the green M&M isn't a girl. And like I had a picture. I was like, here's what she looks like. We need to real quick change this M&M before the meeting with M&M. And I was like, no, we don't have time. It's going to be fine. I was like, no, I don't think it's going to be fine. I said, I think like if there's no time to change it, don't show that M&M to them. Like keep that M&M away and just show them the red one and the yellow one that you have. And that'll be fine. But I think they're going to get mad if they notice that the green M&M is wrong. They're going to think we don't get them. And I was just like, no, it's fine. That's what I was told. So then after the meeting, they were mad. The M&M was mad. I heard that the meeting didn't go well. And someone mentioned to me, yeah, the green M&M's a girl, and that's not what we showed them. I was like, I told you guys, I know I'm just a junior here, but I'm not dumb. Like there's some things you don't do.
Mars Chocolate dropped out, and over time, so did many other companies. Keebler Elves were replaced with creepy gnomes, and Chester Cheetah was wiped entirely.
We had to redo things in every different way possible and give him so many different designs. It was crazy. What I realized was that Larry didn't actually know what he wanted. He had to be shown many versions till he liked something. One of the designers even went back and showed him old stuff again, which he would sometimes choose saying, this is it. He would say things like, I need it to be 30% better. Other times he would say, just make it awesome. I remember after he had seen a character's costume, he was focused on the stitching texture of the cuffs. He didn't like it, so he told them to make it double stitched, then changed his mind and told them that it had to be triple stitched. He micromanaged everyone, and it was always spontaneous, unpredictable, and entirely selfish, and with no concern about anyone else. We never knew what he wanted us to work on next, never knew when the next review would be, or if what we'd done was final or had to be totally redone. We often had to work late into the night and could only stop when he decided to leave for the day. Many times during production, they had tours for potential investors to the building. We had to be on our best behavior and look busy during this time. They had tours pretty much every week, taking people around the studio, boasting and lying to them about the movie and its technology. They were always saying they would be the next Pixar and that this movie was like Toy Story. One such tour was with a big-name film distribution company, Paramount or Universal. I remember them coming out of the meeting with Larry and Co., and they came straight to our desk and said they wanted to ask us what we thought of the production, because they didn't believe what they were told by management. I, among the others, didn't hold back. We told them exactly what was going on. Let's just say they didn't invest in the film.
But no, most of the time you're spent in that dark room. And actually, that room, you know, I started calling it a dungeon. Working in there all day, you lose your sense of time. Like the only light I had was for my monitor, and then I had a desk lamp if I needed it. And otherwise it was pitch black. And then they brought tours in all day. So they had sort of like a big movie screen set up, and then a bunch of like chairs in front of it, and then behind it were some cubicles, and over to the side were some computers, and that's where we all worked. So I was listening, like, I don't know how many freaking tours they did. They did, man, I was listening to the Hershey's chocolate song all day.
Promotional stills were released later that year that look almost identical to the final film, but compared to what was seen before this, it was night and day. By this time, producer George Johnson resigned. He took a chunk of the crew with him to his company Mammoth Vision, an entertainment and animation studio. Lionsgate also left the project as deadline after deadline was missed.
There's some stuff in there that might give a sane person pause. It gave me pause, but I didn't, you know, this being my first job and being very eager to please, I was like, I was thinking in my head, this isn't going to be in the final movie. Like, they're changing everything all the time in this movie, so this stuff isn't going to be in it for sure. And then that stuff was in it. And I was real surprised, because of all the things you're going to take out or put in, you're going to keep, like, the weird Nazi stuff. You're going to keep the misogynist stuff. What? That was crazy. But there would be things that I would point out and say, hey, this needs to change. And I would get told no.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a spam.
Tell me something. Are those melons real?
Let's strawberry jam out of here. I'm gonna pop your corn, lady. Holy chips. You cold-farted itch.
Larry loved Weasel. He was really into this character a lot. He voiced Weasel. But I think he had decided to voice Weasel. I don't know when he decided to voice Weasel, but he was very excited about Weasel. He wanted Weasel to look greasy and slimy. He was really obsessed with the animation for it. Like, he paid extra careful attention, and he would talk in Weasel voice fairly frequently, just randomly when he'd come back in there. Like, I'd hear him, you know, doing lines from the movie.
Wait. If perhaps you desire a companion for those lonely bachelor nights, then...
It only really hit me after I saw the movie. It was like, oh, Larry was just impersonating Weasel all the time.
In early 2008, the note defaulted. Fireman's Fund took over the production, and Threshold lost the rights to the film. In late 2008, the film was completed. Crew hired from Digiscope by Fireman's Fund had finished post-production. Screenings were presented to crew members, the Motion Picture Association was presented the film and rated it PG. It was ready to go. Yet no one was certain when it was actually coming out. People had been wondering for a while by then, where was it? Or what was it?
When is it gonna be out?
Am I right that this is a movie about talking food? Just imagine Hilary Duff as a carrot.
Sounds like a bunch of writers got in a room, gulped down several pots of coffee, smoked a lot of cigarettes, threw a few pitches around, then several hours later, finally decided to rip off Toy Story.
You idiots! Do you know how dumb you sound? This movie takes place in a supermarket and is about food. Toy Story was about a boy and his toys.
I don't understand. The status is set at filming, and yet there are only 2 actors listed, and there is no plot summary written. Odd.
This movie looks really stupid. You can visit foodfight.com though. What kind of plot is this?
The animation looks fine. Doesn't look crap at all.
It's basically just a giant ad for everything you can buy, masked very lightly as a movie. No thanks. Snakes on a Plane will be better than this dreck.
Check out the official site. It's been updated. This film is gonna rock. It looks so stupid.
2009 came by and still nothing. In 2010, 3D Hollywood released an interview with Kasanoff and Joshua Wexler.
Foodfight is our first CGI theatrical animated movie. Foodfight takes place in the supermarket. When all the people leave and the lights go up, there's a beat with the supermarket and transforms into the city. The aisles look like city streets, the boxes look like buildings. The Italian food section aisle looks like Venice. The Chinese food looks like Beijing. And to life comes all the food characters. Not food, but the food characters. Some you know and love already, like Mr. Clean and Charlie the Tuna and Twinkie the Kid. And a lot who we introduce you to, who we've made up, who are played by Charlie Sheen, Eva Longoria, Brady, Hilary Duff, Ed Asner, Christine Baranski, Doris Leach, and more. It'll take us about a year to finish. We financed the whole thing ourselves and with equity. We're almost done with it. We're still in the process of finishing texturing and effects.
Merchandise produced years prior was beginning to pop up in stores and crane machines with no context, as retailers grew impatient. In 2011, the public finally got their first trailer, a combination of footage from the scrapped version, a middle version where motion capture had just started being used, and the final version. It was not met with high praise. It's unknown what Fireman's Fun was doing with the movie for the last 3 years. Possibly they were shopping it around to possible buyers, but unfortunately nobody was taking it. So on September 26, 2011, Foodfight was put up on auction with an opening bid of $2.5 million. Nobody bought it. Because of this, the Fireman's Fund found a few distributors and it was released under their name along with Threshold. In 2011, the movie was released for the first time in theaters in the United Kingdom.
About a dog that saved a girl called Sunshine.
Who was your favourite character? The doggy and the squirrel. Doggy and the squirrel were our favourites, so yeah, good film.
We thought it was really funny. I liked the piglets because they kept on silly noises. Because it had a lot of action and it was funny. My favourite character was the weasel. When this girl punched the other girl all the time. Really awesome. You know what? I love where throwing pumpkins at them, deader than bombs.
Then it was released in Dubai, Russia, and finally it had a straight-to-DVD release in the United States and worldwide. It was a complete failure, making only over $120,000 in the box office, less than 1% of the original budget. Most of those who worked on Foodfight during its early stages actually have no idea that the movie was even completed. Many of those who do know never did watch it. It's been used as an example of one of the worst films ever made, covered extensively on YouTube, but has even received fan art and a fan game. Foodfight did make an impression, but not the impression that Threshold had originally envisioned. In the end, crew reports indicate that the budget didn't even exceed $32 million. Foodfight was a failure, but it was also a product of a lot of labor. Foodfight's a joke, sure, but it's kind of a miracle it even happened in the first place. The artistry, performances, sweat, blood, and tears gone into a movie that bombed shouldn't go unnoticed and undocumented. And here, hopefully, a little more light has been shed upon it.
here I am. It's like 10 minutes to 5 on a Friday. And people are getting ready to leave. I'm getting ready to leave. And Josh Wexler walks up to me. He's like, you got any big plans this weekend? And I was like, no, I'm just gonna like hang out with my roommates or whatever. And he goes, well, we've got this really important project for you, and we need it by noon on Monday. I was like, what's this project? Like, what are you talking about? So he basically told me that they had a really important meeting with investors at noon on Monday, and they needed me to open up every single file. And at the time, these were big lightweight files. They took about 10 minutes to open each. I had to open up every single file and like document it basically. And they wanted to know stuff that made no sense. They wanted to know like the polygon count of the file. They wanted me to confirm if it was textured or not. Okay. Like the location of the file, maybe some other really mundane information, but nothing that important. Like I couldn't imagine that this was that important. And I said, hey, it takes about 10 minutes to open these files. I'm not going to be able to have this ready by Monday. I said, I can't do this like the first half of the day. I said, it's going to take me a couple of weeks to do this at least. And he's like, well, we have to have this on Monday. So like, I don't remember the exact conversation, but basically I got told that I was staying there all weekend and I was allowed to call in my friends if they wanted to come help, but I couldn't leave. And they set me up with like, handed me the keys to the building. They gave me like a binder and like, so that I could call and have food delivered. They had me move my car to like the special, like enclosed garage where the execs all parked. And then everyone just left. And I thought it was a prank. So I was going along with it a little bit because I was like, they're going to tell me any minute, nah, it's fine, go on home. And they didn't. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my God. So I went and I logged into every single computer and I started loading every single file so that it could take, like the 10 minutes to load the file. Sometimes it was 15 or 20 minutes if it was really big. But there was like, I don't know, 1,000 files, or several hundred files. So I did it. I called my roommates and I was like, hey guys, I can't leave the building. Do you guys want to come over and help me or spend time with me this weekend? So they came over and then they started helping me. And we were working in shifts where like one person was sleeping and then a couple of people were on the computers writing down the information. And we did it, and we finished, like literally right before, like 8 a.m. Monday. I did not sleep. I hardly slept. I only got a couple hours sleep, but it was just completely demoralizing. I'd never heard of a place doing that, but of course, I was new and eager to please, and I didn't know. So they completely took advantage of me. And, George came and he looked at me. He's like, why don't you go home for the day? You're done. I was like, are you sure? Sure you want me to go home? I went home for the day and I came in the next day. And they had to negotiate with my roommates to pay them for their time. And I don't think that negotiation went well, but they didn't give me an amount to say to pay them beforehand. So I told them like, hey, you guys work this out afterwards because I don't know. So like they came in based on the promise of getting some money and they were cool with that. But man, that was nuts.